Hello everyone and welcome to a special video of Navis Nobilite. I am Captain Zelnick and today I am going to dedicate this video to TweeTwee, who is in the Discord server, because TweeTwee started asking me questions about fleets one day. And then they mentioned that they were having some problems getting BFG kind of to pick up at their local gaming store. There was a lot of hostility and a great deal of resistance to trying something new. Now, this isn't unusual. Your average gamer group is about as friendly as starting something new as really any group of callous individuals used to having their childhood smashed upon the rocks of modernity. So I wanted to make this video about ways to help create your community because I'm actually doing it right now in my local area. I have successfully managed to convince no less than 4 people to start building fleets. Even more of them are interested to come and give it a shot. And I had to actually sit and reflect on how in the world did I actually do it, and what's a really good way to help somebody to build their community, not just online, but actually at their local gaming store. Now, there are going to be a couple of assumptions to this video, and I really want everyone to understand that I'm not making fun of anyone. I have to make it clear that if you're going to be a community leader, which is ostensibly what you're going to become, BFG has to be built effectively from the ground up. You have to be willing to do a couple of things. And some of those things are rather sacrificing. They aren't easy. Not everything is. Some of it's going to cost you money. Nobody likes giving up money. But this hobby does require a little bit of investment. So let's begin. The very first thing that anyone who wants to begin a local BFG community is to learn the rules. That means if you have no miniatures, but you have a computer that is something slightly better than wood fire in power, or maybe roughly coal fired in strength, you can download Vassal, you can come onto the Discord server, you can ask to learn how to play the game, and then you keep playing it. You play it over and over. You read the rules. You read the rules intimately. You go into every little rule area, every little obscure thing, read it back to front, front to back. And there's a reason for this. While it's handy to have the rules on you, broadly speaking, that's a great thing. You, as that center of the community, are going to be the first person that everyone comes to with questions, and you really do got to have an answer. And it's great to be like, that's a great question. Let's look at the rule book. That's a great way of doing it, but also having that good recall, that really snappy ability to answer, hey, can you walk me through this boarding action? That's really handy. Now, you're going to gain this over time. I'm not saying that you have to have a eidetic memory for the entire rule book, though it is handy. But having the knowledge of the game and understanding it is a big help. You have to have that foundation. The next one is a piece of advice is going to probably be, we're basically escalating in difficulty and cost here. The next one is you have to have all of the counters, all of the measuring devices. You have to have all of the foundation. So I would recommend getting a 6x4 playmat of some variety. There are Battle Mats has actually really, really good ones. I highly recommend them. Be willing to spend a little money on something that looks good, because the as a connoisseur of food, the first bite is always with the eye. And if people come over to your table and they see this beautiful, gorgeous gaming mat of a amazing starscape with little starships on it, they're going to look at that and say, "That's really cool." And that's really what the first thing you need to do when you start spreading this game. People have to be able to be caught by the visuals of the game. Your minis don't even have to be painted. A beautiful starscape always catches the eye. But you'll also need blast markers. You will also need measuring tapes. You'll need bearing compasses, Novacana templates. All of these are available for free. You just need to either print them out or get a 3D print of them, or if you have a guy who works at a print shop, have it done on a nice, decent cardstock or cardboard, which is even better. And have asteroid fields, gas clouds. If you're looking in the videos, you'll see really good examples of really good gas clouds. You could also go on to Etsy and look for people who do masonite work and have custom gas clouds and custom asteroid fields and warp rifts and planets and have all of that stuff ready. Because if you have everything ready, you're not going to look like a fool when you don't have anything. And make absolutely sure that you have access to the gunnery table, which is very important. Either have the rulebook or the guide on hand. So that's all of the stuff that's relatively low expenditure. The next part is going to get a little bit harder because it's not only dealing with some of the internal preferences of the players of Battlefleet Gothic, but it also requires a little bit of sacrifice on the part of you, the would-be community organizer. The first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get some fleets. I would recommend getting 2,000 points of Imperial Navy, Chaos, and two others. Now, that when I say Imperial Navy, I mean Imperial Navy, not Space Marines. Get Imperial Navy, get Space Marines, and then get two others. They could be Space Marines. I'd recommend one human or human-like faction and one alien faction. So it can be Orcs and Eldar. It can be Tau and Tyranids. It could be Space Marines and Necrons. It could be Orcs and any name your stripe or variety of Corsair Craft World Eldar. Have a good spread at 2,000 points. Now, why do you want this? Well, principally, if you go to a local game store and you're only playing the same thing, people aren't necessarily going to see the variety of the game. Also, I hate to impress this upon people, but Space Marines and Imperial Guard are not everyone's favorite army. There are a lot of people who like Necrons, that like Tau, like Tyranids, like all of the other races. There are even some people who like Eldar, as rare as that may sound. And you, as the player, have to remove absolutely all of your preferences as to which race is your favorite at this time. You have to, if you're a Space Marine fanboy, give up and become a Battlefleet Gothic fanboy. You can't main any one fleet, you have to main all of the fleets. Now, I know that there's a lot of bias in this hobby. There are people who look at one of the races and say, I frickin' hate them. But in the scope of Battlefleet Gothic, you have to love them. So, to give you an example, I think Tyranids are the most boring antagonist that Games Workshop has ever maced. They are predictable, they are boring, they are faceless. It's dull. They're just predictably dull, and they're awful. But I love them in Battlefleet Gothic. They are fun, they are interesting, and one day I'm going to have a fleet of them. But for example, there are plenty of people who have a deep-seated animosity against the Tau. In Battlefleet Gothic, you got to love them because you have to love the way they play. You have to love the way that their ships move, function, and shoot because it's Battlefleet Gothic, not just the Tau. And that's going to be hard for a lot of people because you will eventually have to own one of those fleets one day. Because it's not just going to be about you, but you also have to be able to provide to that one guy who's like, yeah, but I only really like this one race, and no one seems to have them as a fleet. And you can go, I've got a fleet. You want to play as them? And that's how you get people roped in. And the hard part is, at least in the past, this was expensive. Ships were not cheap. Today, they are cheaper than they have ever been before. If you need a fleet, you could probably find go to a local gaming store and be like, hey, is anybody here a 3D printer? And like 8 guys will raise their hands because everyone is giving in to the great resin craze of the modern era. And you'd be like, hey, I need a couple of things printed on the cheap. Are you can you build this? Can you print these STLs for me? You may have to buy the STLs. You may have access to them through a friend. And then you'll have a fleet at significantly cheaper than you would nominally have. Or just go into go into my Discord and talk about, hey guys, I need cheap ships on the cheap. Or if you want to be really, really ballsy, really ballsy, you can just use the papercraft stuff, which is not as good, but it's a start. But have your ships. Now, moving on from here, things get even more difficult. Okay? Because the first thing that you should do once you have gotten your ships is start painting them. And I know I'm calling out a lot of people here with, body counts of in the dozens of things they need to paint. And I just finished painting a fleet for the first time in over a decade just last week, and I'm now staring down one of my Tau fleets to get them completed, and I'm very intimidated by it because it's an awful lot of escorts and light cruisers. However, but when you make them, even if they are poorly painted, they're barely table legal, they're still drawing better to the eye than standard gray. But you can have a fleet of ships that aren't painted just as an example of what they look like. So you have one painted fleet and one unpainted fleet. And you can be like, yeah, this is what they look like when they come out of the printer. And that's usually a really good way, again, to rope somebody into it, because then they can see the quality of the miniature without concerns that what they're actually painting is a low quality piece of work. And the resin quality has gotten really, really good recently. So there's a lot of good things in the future in regards to that. Now, this is the bare bones basics of building a community. You have to really start getting rid of your biases and having fun with everything. Your fleet, you will eventually have probably a fleet of everything at some point. But of course, this does mean you have certain levels of resources to spend. If you have nothing, maybe you should work on just getting one friend who has more resources than you into this and get him passionate about it. That way, he can help build that community. And overall, the real terror of it is you have to be social. You have to be willing to talk to anybody, even the really weird looking ones, even the gross looking ones, even the ones with the crew cuts that look like they were just kicked out of the military. You got to be willing to talk to anyone about this because it's not about you and it's not about them, it's about the game. And if you really, really hate this person, but they're interested, gain the pleasure in knowing that after you get them hooked into it, you can beat the crap out of them with your fleets. You always have to find a way to make it fun and make it interesting. So it is a difficult path because eventually, if you really, really want like the community to really accelerate, you do things like hold tournaments or hold a campaign with prizes like an entire 1500 point fleet. That's how you attract attention. If you really want to attract attention and you have basically all the fleets you want and you have a guy who's a good painter, give him some money, have him paint up a fleet that looks really good, have that as the reward. So that's how you really grow BFG. You have to effectively grow beyond most of the biases that are instilled upon us by the greater 40K community. If you hate Tau, you have to stop hating Tau. If you hate Eldar, you have to stop hating Eldar. If you hate Space Marines, you got to stop hating Space Marines. Because again, it's not that the ships are the Space Marines. These are starships that fight different ways that are all fun in different ways. And that's probably the hardest hurdle because it does mean that all of the humanity fuck yeah guys are going to have to hold their nose and buy a Xenos fleet. I mean, that's hard because if you don't have any interest in Xenos, that may be a hard hurdle to cross. But when you actually play with them, you'll realize that they're fun in their own right, and you can talk about how cool they are to somebody who may want to play them, and then you can beat them within an inch of their lives with the fleet of your choice. So that's a really decent and handy guide. Now, a couple of other things that should help. It's always good to have a friend, have somebody there to play with. You know, somebody to show off their stuff. You usually can get one other guy to play this game just by being like, hey, what's your favorite 40K faction? Hey, if I got you a fleet of starships for this faction, show them a couple of really cool pictures. Would you play this game with me? Usually, people, if they're looking at free stuff, they'll say yes. And again, it's cheap and you can leave them to paint their own shit. So I want to personally thank Nate in the N8 in my server. He has been doing fantastic work helping me spread BFG in my local area. I want to thank Zach, who just today, Zach, I want to congratulate you. You got your first victory against the Imperial Navy with your Space Marines. Space Marines that you literally printed and painted over the course of the last 2 weeks. So great job, guys. I'm actually really impressed with everyone in my local community, and the fact that we're growing at such a great rate makes me really happy. But all of you guys out there who are building and constructing, your fleets and trying to build your community. If you guys need a good 3D printer on the cheap, I highly recommend Johnny Turbo in my server. He has a lot of things he can make for you, and he's very reasonably priced. If you are looking for something in the UK, there are places like Vanguard Minis, Battlefleet Galaxy, Scourge Scenics. A lot of these different people make a lot of ships. There's also a lot of friendly local 3D printers in the UK. I'd recommend asking around. All right, everybody, I want to thank you all so much for watching and have a great day.